So something I've been speaking to a lot of filmmakers about recently is the idea that nobody's really sure what the word filmmaker means anymore. The industry has shifted so much and so fast that a lot of the lines have become very blurred, and that's caused quite a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, a lot of frustration, and maybe even panic. And if these are things that you felt or are currently feeling, I can absolutely promise you that you aren't alone, and I'm feeling that tension too. But staying stuck in such a negative mindset can turn you quite sour and bitter very, very quickly. So I want to try and look at how we got here and what we could be doing now in whatever stage of career or position that you're in. Just to frame this all properly, in this video, I'm going to not be talking about anything long form. So that's long form drama, TV series, or feature films or feature documentaries. What I'm focusing on is branded content. And that's quite a big umbrella of commercials, branded docs, social campaigns, internal comms, basically anything where you're working directly for a brand or through an agency or production company that is working for a brand, because it's probably the biggest space that most filmmakers are working in today. So the first major shift has been the access to the tools that we have. Cameras that used to cost tens of thousands of pounds are now practically affordable to anyone. And there's loads of great videos online of people doing camera or lens comparison tests where for the general public and kind of broad audience, the difference between £1,000 camera now or a £10,000 camera now is basically unnoticeable, particularly as the screens for that content have gotten smaller and smaller. And then you add things like cheaper drones, easy to use editing software, LUTs, plugins, and suddenly the kind of base floor of what it takes to make something look very, very good and premium is so much lower than it ever has been. The next big shift has been platforms. High budget TV commercials and music videos used to be the kind of main spend, but when things went online, we started to get digital first campaigns, and now it's all about socials with very high volume, fast turnaround, much smaller budget, and a million different deliverables in like every aspect ratio imaginable. Not only that, but more recently, audiences have really started to embrace the kind of rougher, more authentic, homemade style of content because it feels more personal and more relatable. Hence the rise of influencers. So this kind of glossier, cinematic, premium content is no longer held in the kind of high regard that it used to be. Now, because of these two shifts, new job titles started showing up. So videographers, content creators, self-shooting directors, self-shooting DPs, and the range and quality of those skill sets is massive. Someone could be doing wedding videos, someone else could be shooting branded docs, and they're both being called the same thing and fit under the same umbrella. So the word filmmaker itself just started to loosely refer to anyone who had a camera and was filming things. Then also because of that shift in content and these more hybrid roles appearing, another change has been that a lot of agencies and production companies have bought all their production in-house. So work that used to go to freelancers or small production companies is now kept internal. And that sort of changed the whole pipeline of where jobs come from and who's getting hired for those jobs. And lastly, the elephant in the room of AI has sped up all of this again and is changing things at such an incredible rate. Some of these tools are genuinely terrifying and unbelievable. And again, there's loads of great videos online about this topic that I'll link to. But what that's doing once again is raising client expectations for speed and lowering the perception of cost. And suddenly they're asking why something takes 2 weeks when they've seen an AI tool spit it out in like an afternoon. So that's a very, very quick condensed version of some of the reasons we've kind of ended up in this situation. But what problems has this started to cause for filmmakers today? The first major problem is label confusion. Videographer, filmmaker, content creator, a lot of clients don't really see the difference. So when you go to quote for a project, they might be comparing you or your production company to someone charging a tenth of the rate without really understanding or realizing that you're offering something completely different and have completely different skill set and value. So storytelling, direction, edit craft, building trust with contributors, those kind of skills are getting hidden behind the word of filmmaker, or they might not understand your role at all. So, for example, if you're a gaffer or an AC, they might never have worked on those kind of sets before, and they don't really understand why you need to be on set or to pay you in order to achieve a certain quality level or result that they're after. Budgets are also getting increasingly tight, some part due to the amount of deliverables now constantly needed, and partly due to the kind of larger economic climate. So more content is often needed at lower prices, which leads straight into client expectations. If you put yourself in their shoes for a second, they're constantly surrounded by content online now that looks really good. And they're seeing, really polished brand films, very slick ads, very high quality social campaigns. And particularly those who are less experienced, they don't really always know the difference between what resources it took to achieve them. To them, it all just looks very achievable. So they don't necessarily understand the difference between like a 2-person social shoot or a fully crewed commercial, or the cost and time difference between those things. And on top of that, the other problem is that a lot of people kind of lower down in the industry don't charge properly for their work. So they throw in development time, sound design, grading, cut downs, deliverables, all as part of the same kind of flat fee and package, which sets a precedent to clients so that people who are charging for those things, clients can get surprised by that and don't realize the kind of work that's going on behind the scenes for those things. And it never comes from a bad place. Normally, it's just a lack of understanding or appreciation from their point of view. If they've already seen people provide something for less, then why should they pay more for that? And that kind of mismatch between perception and reality is where so much of the frustration within the industry, I think, is coming from, which leads to the final problem that I think we're facing within the industry, which is this quite extreme culture of overworking and burnout, especially for kind of solo operators and smaller crews, where you're being asked to do more versions of something on shorter deadlines with less money and less time on set. And it's not really about creativity anymore. It's like about stamina, and long term, that just isn't sustainable. So if that's the reality of the problems that we're facing right now, I think we have to kind of zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture in order to understand and make sense of it. So the harsh truth is that businesses don't care about effort or creativity or even sometimes practicality. Business only cares about value. And in filmmaking, especially in branded content, your price isn't necessarily tied to the hours or how hard you work. It's purely tied to how much the client perceives your work is worth. And that applies whether you're going direct to a brand as a videographer, direct to an agency as a director, or even direct to a production company as a member of crew. That's why some people undercharge because they never explain or frame their value properly, and why some people massively overcharge because they position themselves with higher perceived value. And it might feel a little bit unfair, and often it is, but once you realize that, it can also be quite freeing, because that's where opportunities start to appear and where we can focus more on what we can control rather than what we can't. Let's focus on what opportunities can come from all of this. The first one is that making good work has never been easier because of how affordable all of these really high quality tools are, and the fact that there's endless tutorials online and brilliant filmmaking communities out there. It means that your ability to create amazing work that arguably sometimes looks just as good as massive high-end productions has so much less friction and barrier to entry than before. And on top of that, getting in with brands is also way easier too, because it used to be that the only way you could work with larger brands was that you had to go through a production company or agency, and you had to wait years to prove yourself and work your way up for certain opportunities because of the amount of spend on certain things and the amount of risk. But because now of the variety and content type and campaigns, it's much easier to get a foot in the door working on something much smaller scale and lower budget to prove yourself. Not only that, but the tide has also started to shift slightly, with brands realizing that volume isn't always the answer, and that views and clicks can actually just sometimes be vanity metrics. if those aren't converting into something tangible like sales or community or brand building. So that's another huge opportunity, because if you know how to make work that truly connects with people or converts into something more than just mind-numbing content, you can have quite a lot of extreme value within companies and brands. And lastly, just with the AI elephant in the room, I'm personally doubling down that there will be more of a craving from audiences and brands for authenticity as a backlash from the wave of kind of AI churn that's coming. So powerful human stories and moments are things that are going to become increasingly valuable, because it's the only thing that AI can't recreate. And it's the only thing that I think will continue to resonate and connect with audiences and the customers of brands. So that all leads on to the question of, where does that leave us right now, and what do we actually do with all this information? So for me, I've tried to narrow it down to three things, which are capability, clarity, and visibility. So if everything comes down to perceived value, then A, you need to have that value, ideally in the first place. B, you need to know and understand what that value really is. And C, you need others to be able to see and understand that value too. So capability is about sharpening your craft and getting the skills to have that value in the first place. And because we're in such a creative industry, there's absolutely no limit on this. I think you should be constantly learning and improving and working on your craft so that the value you bring to the table can continuously increase. Then clarity is about knowing exactly what that value is, not just I'm a filmmaker, I make films, but what is the unique contribution you make that a client actually cares about. And again, this applies to any role, any position at any point in your career. And lastly, visibility is about showing the invisible behind the scenes work. If no one can see that value, they can't understand it. And a lot of what we do in the filmmaking kind of process is work that goes on behind the scenes that people don't see, but that is so crucial to making the final product or video. So the more you can share that process and the results and show things like your personality, how you are to work with, the more clients understand what goes into what you do and then start to understand the value that you bring. I think the final thing that I really want to say is that there aren't really any rules anymore. Every filmmaker I know has taken a different path, and those paths are changing all the time, and the industry is changing all the time. So genuinely don't feel discouraged if your journey is looking different or if you're not where you want to be. Just focus on keep working on your craft, get your value clear. Why are you good at what you do? And make sure people can see what you're doing and see that value in what you do.